Alright everybody, today what we're going to be working on is how to construct sinusoidal functions given certain points. Something you're going to want to make sure that you have is you want to have some graph paper, so you want to make sure that you can have some graph paper to work on. You also want to make sure that you have Desmos up ready to go. So make sure you have that ready. Go and pause me while you're getting that ready. One thing I want to make sure you do in Desmos is we're going to go to graph settings. And right here, I'm going to start right here on the x-axis. We're going to start at 0. And over here, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go from 0 to 2 pi. Okay? And for the y-axis, you can keep it from -10 to +10. Make sure you're in radians. So make sure you click on radians. That'll help you be able to graph stuff. Alright? So make sure you have that in Desmos. It'll help you when we're graphing it. Also, make sure that you have some graph paper, like I said, handy, ready to go. Alright? So right now, first thing I'd like you to do after you have all that stuff ready to go is put y equals a sine b, we're going to use x instead of theta, minus c plus d. Because we want to be able to identify certain things. The a value, the b value, the c value, and the d value. Okay? So right now we're going to use some points. We're going to plot them. It's going to help us find certain things. Now, one of the things that you need to realize, anytime it says you have a midline somewhere, like at 0, 2, alright, quick refresher, midline, that's the line that passes through the middle of the sine or the cosine function. So right now our d value is definitely going to be at a 2. So put d value as a 2. Next thing I want you to do is I want you to plot these ordered pairs. Alright, so let's go ahead and plot a 0 and a 2, and a 3 and a -6. I'm going to go over to my graph. I'm going to make the graph with my x-axis and my y-axis and just write out, once again, y equals a sine bx minus c plus d. I'm going to right now make sure I put a 2 for my midline right here. So I'm going to plot that point 0, 2. Alright, I'm going to also plot 3, -6, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Drawing my midline. Okay. Now understand, from the midline to this minimum point, this minimum value, which is at 3 and a -6, that's my Corgi Scout. She'll probably park in the background every once in a while. We're going to go down, keep going down, all the way to that point. It's going to come back up. Alright? So what I want you to do is we're going to break this, we're going to figure out from here to here, from the midline to the minimum. That distance is what we call the amplitude. So our amplitude is from here going straight down. So that's our amplitude. So from 2 to a -6, we are going to say our amplitude is 8. Okay? Now, one thing we need to understand is a positive sine graph looks like this. Let's say this is at 0, 0. It goes up and down and back up. Alright? So if we're at 0, 0, our regular sine wave would go up to 1, down to -1, and back to 0. This is actually at 0 pi, and this would be at 2 pi. Remember, the period of a sine and cosine function is 2 pi. Now, a negative sine graph would start at 0, 0, but it would go down and then back up and then finish right there at the midline. So this would be an example of y equals the sine of x, and this would be an example of y equals negative sine of x. I'll go over to Desmos so you can kind of see. Alright, so if I said y equals, let's see here, y equals sine of x, you can see it goes up and down and back up. But down here, if I say y equals negative sine of x, you can see it goes down and then back up. So you want to know the difference between a positive sign graph, and a negative sign graph. Okay. So right now, if we take a look at ours, we can kind of see that this is going down, so we're going to have a negative sign graph. So we're going to call our A value negative 8, because it goes down 8 units, even though our amplitude is a positive 8. Now, something we talked about in class is I wanted you guys to be able to break things down into quarters, like be able to see parts of the graph. All right. So one thing I want to do right now is I want you to take a look at this graph right here, and take a look at this graph right here, and we're going to break it into quarters. So like that's a quarter. Each of these are quarters. Each of these are quarters. All right. I realize those are kind of small, so I'll make one that's a little bit bigger. All right. So let's go ahead and go over here. I'll just make one that's a little bit bigger for you to be able to see. So let's say we had a negative sign graph, and I'm just going to break it down into quarters as best as I can. Alright. So let's say we had a graph that went down and back up, and then up, and finally back down. So you should have this in your journal already, because it was on my board before spring break. We had to erase everything. Alright? But I want you to understand, like, even though this is a negative sign graph, each of these are a quarter of the whole graph. Alright? So all the way across, like from here all the way there, we call that the period. So right now, it looks like in our graph we've only traveled 1/4 of the way through the whole graph. So what is the distance from here to here? The distance from right here to here is from 0 to 3. So basically we've only traveled 3 units. So if we've traveled 3 units from here to right there, being that from 0 to a 3, we're only a quarter way there, we're going to multiply that by 4, and so our period is going to be 12 units. That's what I want you to understand. That's how you would find your period of the graph. So this is going to go 12 units before it finally finishes. Okay, and we'll show you in Desmos once we get to finish it. We'll type it in. You'll see how it finishes at 12 units. Okay, so remember the formula for the period is always equal to 2 pi over b. So we're going to put 2 pi over b. This is going to help us find our b value that we need for our function. So 2 pi over b equals 12 over 1. All right, move this over here. Do a little cross multiplication. All right, b times 12, 2 pi. So b times 12 is 12b. 2 pi times 1 is 2 pi. And then we just divide both sides by 12. And b equals 2 over 12, which reduces to 1 over 6. 1 over 6 pi. But we're going to call it pi over 6. That's what we're going to call it. So our b value is going to be pi over 6. So we'll go right here, put pi over 6. Now, the c value deals with our phase shift, but we don't have any phase shift. So this point right here where we started, it did not shift to the right, nor did it shift to the left. So the good news is the c value is 0. So my final answer that I'm going to write in the Khan Academy is y equals negative 8, because we're going down and not up, sine, open parentheses, I'm going to type in a pi over 6, then an x, close it, and I'm going to put plus 2. That's what I'm going to type in. Now what I'm going to do before I type that in is I'm going to go to Desmos and type it in and make sure I haven't done anything, made any silly mistakes. So I'm going to go over to Desmos, type in y equals negative 8 sine. Then I'm going to do the little division bar, type in a pi, go down, type in a 6, go to the right, hit an x, and then go to the right, close the parentheses, and put plus 2. And I'm going to take a look at this. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go to the graph settings, and I am going to finish this graph all the way at 12. See what happens. right, and let's go ahead and zoom out just a little bit more. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit more so you can see it. All right, so on this graph, it starts here. It goes through 3, -6. I'm going to type in the midline. Our midline is y equals 2. That should help. That should bring up some more points for you. So we have 0, 2, 3, -6, 6, 2. We've got up here, we've got the maximum at 9, 10, and it finishes right here. So I wanted you to see the whole graph right here. It goes from here, goes down, all the way back up. And your period, you can see that the length of your period goes from 0 all the way to 12. And hopefully now with this nice, neat graph that Desmos built for us, not me, you can see how I broke it into quarters. There's a quarter, there's a quarter, there's a quarter, there's a quarter. All right. So now I feel pretty confident that I'm going to type this in and I'm going to get the answer right. So I'm going to go to the Khan Academy. Now I'm going to type it in. So let's say negative. Type in the number 8. Hit sign. Open up a parentheses. All right. Make a little fraction, type in pi over 6, go to the right, hit x, go to the right, and finally put plus 2. And voila, got the answer right. Now I'm going to stop this video, I'm going to start another one. This will be part A, I'll do another one for part B. So I'll do this next problem right here for part B, except part B will be a little bit faster than part A.